I'm Karen Sutherland from Edible Eden Design, and today I'm going to talk to you about home composting systems that are easy to implement in your home garden. So I'm going to run you through the ones that I use, talk about their pluses and their minuses and how they've evolved over the years for me, and show you how you can do this really, really simply. Because I see a lot of people in my consulting that have issues with, especially their cold composting and their day-to-day composting systems. So these are the systems that I've used for many, many years. But problems have evolved, so rats have really moved into my garden because I've got so much food, and they've become a real issue in inner city parts of Melbourne where there's lots of food production, chickens, as you can hear, and composting. So we have to find ways to protect our compost from the rats. So how I knew I had rats was I would tip all my fresh kitchen waste, shush chicken, into the bin in the morning, maybe putting this much in, and by the next day it had disappeared. Well, composting does not happen that fast in a cold composting system. So the rats were even, I was using mesh around the breathing holes of the compost area, and the rats were chewing the plastic to get around it and get into there. So this bin is open to the ground, and to access it was a great system. I put the compost in the top, I cut some holes in the bottom, put a little piece. Why don't you come over here and get some of this, Ginger? Here, there you go. And the compost would be able to be accessed from the bottom. So it's a great system, except that it was too easy for rats to access. So if you don't have rats, you can still use this, and it's a great system. So then I moved to using a worm farm, and this is quite good for kitchen waste, and the rats can't climb up the outside of it, and so it was quite safe from rats. And it's worked quite well, except it didn't take the level of garden waste that I used to incorporate into these large cold composting bins. So this I used to put some garden waste and kitchen waste in, as well as shredded paper, things like that, to balance it out. So this still didn't really solve my problem, although it's a terrific idea for smaller areas, and I could have just bought more of them. But I was interested to find out what else I could use. So then I got my dad on the job, and he made me up something that is rat proof. So this is a 44-gallon drum, cleaned out, and there's holes drilled in the bottom to allow access for worms to come up, for liquid to drain through, for aeration generally. And he welded me up a really whiz-bang top for this that I can take off. And there's two little access areas on hinged doors that are able to be closed and locked, so the rats can't open this by themselves. So this is a rat-proof compost bin, homemade. So all I do when I need to do my compost every couple of days is tip my compost bin out from the kitchen. Now, you couldn't quite see there, but what I do is I put a bit of brown paper in the bottom of my compost bin in the kitchen, so it comes out really easily, and it makes the bottom much easier to clean out. The other thing I do is I keep a knife in the area, and so if there's bits that I want to chop up further, like I was a bit lazy or I've been a bit slack lately with my composting, I just chop them up in situ as they go in. Ginger agrees. Ginger chicken. So here's a tamarillo. You really should be cutting up things. Ginger agrees. A bit smaller than that, about this size. So that's one of the common mistakes people make, is that they don't cut their compost material up small enough. And okay, a lot of this is not cut up quite small enough, and it will just take longer to break down. So another thing we can use in our compost to balance it out is some shredded paper. So this is just your typical home office type stuff. And so compost is a balancing act. So it's a balance between dry and wet, between brown and green, and just learning how to understand what's going on in your compost bin or your compost heap. So you're trying to get a good balance or mix of green, such as lawn clippings, kitchen waste, even garden waste cut up quite small with some garden shears, just hacked up really small, and also brown or dry, and that includes dry leaves, dry straw or bedding from the chicken area that I'm going to show you in a minute, and shredded paper. So we're going to do some easy harvesting of chicken manure and bedding straw from the chicken coop, Now, chicken manure is very, very strong in its nitrogen level and also in the rate at which it releases its nitrogen. So chicken manure has about twice as much nitrogen than cow manure, and it also releases it at twice the rate. So you can see that's quite an effect, and that's why chicken manure is thought of as really hot. So it's not really great to use on the garden unless it's been composted first. So now we're going to open up the chicken coop and do a big changeover of straw. Now this is just an easy way of doing this. I just pull out the bedding manure, the manure with the chicken bedding straw. And if you're worried about the effects of this on your lungs, you can. I mean, I just try not to breathe too much as I go in there, but you can wear a mask when you're doing this. It can also be easier to move there. I've got a removable perch for this reason. Scrape it all out. So I've got the compost bin within easy reach. Yep. Somebody's a bit excited. There's general excitement in the chicken coop today. So now it's time to put the fresh straw in. I've given it a really good scrape and sweep out. So in goes the new bedding straw. Around the nesting box. Back in goes the little perching bar, and ready to close up again. So all you do now is every time I add my kitchen waste, or at least every second time, so at least once a week, I stir the layer that I've just added on to as far as I can go down just underneath. So I find if you're constantly incorporating the two layers, so you're always having some sort of mixture and not just having these solid layers of individual additions to the compost, you get a really good result. So as long as there's some mixing. And that's the only real key. Besides, if you see it too wet, I mean, this is just a nice damp. Here's a worm. Here, Ginger. Eat that. Here you go. If it's too dry, you'll always see ants, so that's a sign that you need to add more water. So it's always handy having a tap or a hose near your compost bin so you can adjust it if necessary. But I'm just mixing this in because some of this bedding straw is a bit too dry. In fact, I may need to add some water to this. And if it's too dry, the worms that are in here that I've introduced, composting worms, they won't be able to survive. So it's really important to get an even consistency. Oh look, girls, there's a spider if you want it. There you go. So mixing. This actually does need some more water, so I'm going to get a bucket of water. So I've got some water to rinse out my compost bucket, and then I'm just going to pour it over the dry bedding straw. So achieve two things at once. So I just continue mixing. Still a bit dry, so I'm going to go back and get a bit more water in a minute. So just mix it right through. It probably takes about 5 minutes. You can also, I'll just keep that till there. You can also use these. I find the Homey tool just as easy as anything, but this is another method to drive down. It's a little bit hard when it's high like this, and then you pull it up, and it does help aerate your compost. It's just, as I say, a little bit difficult when it's up in the air like this, and it's not really pulling it up terribly well. So hence why I find this tool really useful. I mean, it's useful for a million different things, but it's quite good for mixing compost. You can see down below how well that's working, and it also means that there's very little smell with this. It just moderates all the layers. Maybe I'm immune to the smell of compost. Anyway, it's composting away, and there's worms in there. There's a worm. That's what you want it to look like. Not too wet. It's a Goldilocks type situation. Not too wet, not too dry, not too many greens, not too many browns. Get your compost balance. So The last form of composting I'd like to talk about is a deep litter chicken run. And this is courtesy of these girls, who are very, very noisy today. So in this area goes dead leaves, autumn leaves that have fallen down. I throw weeds, I throw garden prunings, just from pruning various herbs or anything, especially that the chickens quite like to eat. So they can gradually just peck their way through them. So if we dig down here, and you can see how they've gone around the edges, and you can see the height. So they generate about 1 shovel deep of manure, and with everything I add to it, it generates about 1 shovel deep of compost every year from this area, which is quite a lot of compost. It's about 9 or 10 barrows full. Now if we dig into this little girl will get out of the way, you can see that this is still composting, all these weeds that they've been given. So that hasn't rotted down yet, but that will. And underneath that, you see they find all sorts of bugs in here, all the tiny little bugs, and that's them looking for that is what makes this work. So if I dig into here and show you a bit lower, they're very excited now. There's worms in there, and look what's below. They've incorporated it into the soil, and it's kind of a soily compost that is what makes the deep litter run work so well. This is it's never smelly. It's a little bit wet at the moment because we've had a lot of rain, but it's a fantastic method of making compost in your garden.